The courtroom loomed large and intimidating as Lily Jiang walked up the stone steps. At 19, she had never imagined herself becoming involved in something so important. The small town of Riverdale was not known for much beyond its annual apple festival and the old mill that had closed down 10 years ago. But now it was at the center of a legal battle that had caught the attention of news outlets across the state. Lily clutched her notebook tighter as she pushed through the heavy wooden doors. The courtroom was already filling up with townspeople, reporters and suited figures who carried expensive briefcases and spoke in hushed, confident tones. These were the lawyers for North Star Chemical, the company that many believed had poisoned their town's water. "You made it just in time," said Professor Wilson, waving Lily over to where he sat in the second row. As her pre-law advisor, he had suggested this internship at the town's public defender office. "Today's going to be interesting. The company is bringing in their expert witness." Lily slid into the seat beside him, her eyes taking in everything. "I'm still not sure why Mr. Rivera wanted me here. I'm just an intern. I file papers and make coffee." Professor Wilson smiled. "Sometimes the fresh eyes see what the tired ones miss. Besides, Rivera needs all the help he can get. North Star has 5 attorneys and he's got himself and a part-time paralegal. The town's case against North Star Chemical wasn't complicated to understand. For years, residents had noticed a strange taste to their water. Then came the illnesses. Rare cancers, respiratory problems, children born with unexpected health issues. Too many to be random chance, they said. Too many to ignore. The judge entered and everyone stood. Judge Thompson was a tall woman with silver hair and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. She had a reputation for fairness but also for running a tight courtroom. She nodded for everyone to sit. "The defense calls Dr. Harold Bennett to the stand," announced the lead attorney for North Star, a slick-looking man named Richard Green. A distinguished-looking man in his 60s approached the witness stand. His gray hair was perfectly styled, and his blue suit looked expensive. After being sworn in, he settled into the chair with the comfortable air of someone who had done this many times before. "Dr. Bennett, please state your credentials for the court," requested Green. "I hold a PhD in environmental chemistry from MIT, and I've been working in the field for over 30 years. I've published 78 peer-reviewed papers on industrial waste management and water quality assessment. I currently serve as the head of the Institute for Environmental Safety Studies." Lily wrote down the credentials, impressed despite herself. This was the kind of expert witness that small towns like Riverdale couldn't afford to bring in for their side. For the next hour, Dr. Bennett walked the court through complex charts and data sets that all pointed to one conclusion. North Star Chemical's waste disposal practices were well within legal limits and couldn't possibly be responsible for the town's health problems based on these quarterly water samples taken from the river downstream from our facility, Dr. Bennett explained, pointing to a graph displayed on a large screen. The levels of all monitored chemicals remained significantly below the EPA threshold for concern. Lily found herself frowning at the charts. Something didn't feel right, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Her mother had been an environmental scientist before she passed away 3 years ago. Growing up, Lily had spent countless evenings listening to her mother explain her work at the dinner table. Those memories stirred now like something trying to surface. During the lunch break, she approached Attorney Rivera, the town's lawyer. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened and hair mussed from repeatedly running his hands through it. "Mr. Rivera, is there any way I could see the complete environmental reports that North Star submitted?" Lily asked. Rivera looked surprised. "They're part of the evidence file, but there are hundreds of pages of technical data. What are you looking for?" "I'm not sure," Lily admitted, "but my mom worked in environmental science. Something about those charts didn't seem right to me." Rivera sighed. "Look, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but we're fighting a losing battle here. Their expert has the credentials, the data, and the court's attention. Unless we can prove they falsified those reports, we're looking at a quick judgment in their favor. What if they didn't falsify them but manipulated how they collected the data?" Lily suggested. This caught Rivera's attention. "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet. But my mom always said that when you collect your samples matters as much as where you collect them." Rivera studied her for a moment. "The evidence files are in my office. You can look at them after court today, but don't get your hopes up." The afternoon session continued with Dr. Bennett fielding softball questions from North Star's attorney and then facing a cross-examination from Rivera that seemed to go nowhere. The technical language and confidence of the expert witness made Rivera's questions seem amateur by comparison. By the time court adjourned for the day, the mood among the townspeople was grim. Lily overheard snippets of defeated conversations as people filed out. "That's it then. They're going to get away with it. Did you see those fancy charts? We never had a chance. My Tommy's been sick for 2 years, and they're saying it's just bad luck." At Rivera's office, a small space above the town's only hardware store, Lily sat surrounded by boxes of documents. The environmental impact reports from North Star filled 3 large binders. She started with the water quality data that Dr. Bennett had presented in court. Hours passed as Lily meticulously went through the reports. The office grew quiet as the part-time secretary left and even Rivera headed home, telling her to lock up when she finished. "Don't stay too late," he advised. "Court starts again at 9 and tomorrow is the last day before the judge makes her ruling." Lily barely registered his departure. She had spread several reports across the desk and floor, creating a timeline of water samplings and test results. Something was emerging from the pattern. All the samples had been taken on specific days of the month. She pulled out her phone and opened a weather app, checking historical data for the area. Then she found a business news site and looked up North Star's production reports, which were public since they were a traded company. She made notes, drew lines connecting dates, and slowly a pattern emerged. By midnight, her eyes were burning from fatigue, but her heart was racing with excitement and disbelief. She had found something important. Every water sample taken by North Star had been collected during periods when their production was at its lowest point in the monthly cycle. Moreover, they had consistently chosen days that followed significant rainfall, when natural dilution would be at its highest. It wasn't falsification, the data was real. But it was like taking someone's temperature only after they'd taken fever reducers and claiming they were never sick. Lily sat back in the chair, her mind whirling with the implications. North Star hadn't lied about the results, but they had carefully orchestrated when those results were collected. It was cunning, deliberate, and devastating for the people of Riverdale. The question now was what to do with this information. Rivera had already finished his cross-examination of Dr. Bennett. The case was nearly over. Would anyone even listen to an intern who had pieced together a theory in the middle of the night? As she gathered her notes and prepared to lock up the office, Lily thought about her mother. She had always taught Lily that truth mattered, that standing up for what's right wasn't always easy, but it was always necessary. Sometimes one voice is all it takes, her mother used to say. Tomorrow Lily would need to find her voice, even if the whole courtroom, the judge, the lawyers, and especially North Star Chemical, didn't want to hear what she had to say. The people of Riverdale deserved someone who would speak the truth for them, no matter how inconvenient or unwelcome that truth might be. With determination replacing her fatigue, Lily turned off the lights and locked the door behind her. Tomorrow would be a day that changed everything, for the town, for North Star, and for a pre-law student who had never expected to find herself at the center of such an important fight. Lily barely slept that night. Her small apartment above the bookstore downtown was usually cozy and quiet, perfect for studying late into the night. But tonight, her mind wouldn't stop racing through the patterns she had discovered in North Star's environmental reports. She spread her notes across her kitchen table, the overhead light casting shadows as she reviewed everything again. The pattern was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. North Star Chemical had been conducting their environmental tests only during specific conditions. After heavy rainfall when contaminants would be diluted, and during their scheduled maintenance periods when production and pollution was at its lowest. It wasn't random. It couldn't be. Lily picked up her phone and called the one person who might understand what she had found. Despite the late hour, Professor Wilson answered on the third ring. "Lily, is everything okay?" His voice was groggy with sleep. "I'm sorry to call so late, Professor, but I found something in the North Star reports. Something important." She explained her discovery, speaking quickly, afraid he might dismiss her theory if she didn't get all the details out fast enough. Instead, when she finished, there was a thoughtful silence on the line. "That's actually quite brilliant," he said finally. "Strategic sampling to create a misleading data set without technically falsifying anything. It would be hard to prove without additional samples taken during normal operations. But we don't have those, Lily said, frustration creeping into her voice. And court resumes tomorrow for closing arguments. The judge will probably rule by the end of the day. What did Rivera say when you showed him this? I haven't yet. I just figured it out after he left the office. Professor Wilson sighed. You need to show him first thing in the morning. This isn't conclusive proof, but it's enough to request a delay and petition for independent testing. Will he listen to me? I'm just an intern. Make him listen. This is too important for professional hierarchy to get in the way. After they hung up, Lily tried to sleep but ended up staring at her ceiling, watching the headlights of occasional cars create moving patterns of light. Her mother had always taught her to stand up for what she believed in, but this was bigger than anything she had faced before. This wasn't a classroom debate or a campus protest. This was a legal battle with real consequences for real people. By dawn, she had made up her mind. She would do whatever it took to make someone listen. Lily arrived at Rivera's office at 7:30, 2 large coffees in hand, hoping to catch him before he headed to court. The office was still dark when she unlocked the door. She turned on the lights and arranged her notes on his desk, organizing them for maximum clarity and impact. When Rivera arrived at 8, he looked surprised to find her there. You're eager this morning, he said, accepting the coffee she offered. Find anything useful in those reports? Yes, Lily said firmly. I need you to look at this before we go to court. She walked him through her discovery, pointing out the correlation between testing dates, rainfall patterns, and production schedules. As she spoke, Rivera's expression changed from skeptical to concerned to alarmed. This is something, he admitted when she finished, but I don't know if it's enough. We'd need expert testimony to back this up, and we don't have time to find someone. My mother was Dr. Mei Jiang, Lily said. She published several papers on industrial contaminant testing methodologies. I grew up learning about this stuff. That's how I recognized the pattern. Rivera looked at her with new respect. Dr. Jiang was your mother? I didn't make the connection. Her work is cited in some of our supporting documents. I know, Lily said. I saw that last night. Rivera checked his watch. Court starts in 45 minutes. I don't know if the judge will allow new arguments at this point, especially from an intern with no formal credentials. Then let me give you the information to present, Lily pleaded. You're the attorney. You can request additional time for independent testing based on this new analysis. Rivera paced the small office, his brow furrowed in thought. North Star's lawyers will fight it. They'll say we've had months to review this data. But we didn't see the pattern until now. That's new information. It's interpretation of existing information, Rivera corrected. That's different in legal terms. Lily felt her frustration building. So we just let them get away with it? We let them keep poisoning the water while hiding behind manipulated data? Rivera stopped pacing and looked at her. Something in his expression shifted. Let me see those notes again. For the next 30 minutes, they worked together, refining her findings into legal arguments. Rivera made phone calls, trying to locate an expert who could review her analysis quickly. But as the clock ticked closer to 9, it became clear they were out of time. We need to head to court, Rivera said, gathering his briefcase. I'll do what I can with this, but I can't promise anything. The courthouse was packed again, even more crowded than the day before. News of the expected verdict had spread, and everyone wanted to witness the outcome. Lily took her seat next to Professor Wilson, her stomach tight with anxiety. Any luck with Rivera? He whispered as the proceedings began. Some, she replied, but I don't know if it's enough. Judge Thompson called the court to order. This is day 4 of Riverdale vs. North Star Chemical. We will hear closing arguments today, beginning with the defense. Richard Green, North Star's lead attorney, approached the podium with confident steps. His closing argument was polished and persuasive, focusing heavily on Dr. Bennett's expert testimony from the previous day. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. North Star Chemical has maintained full compliance with all environmental regulations. The extensive testing data presented by Dr. Bennett conclusively demonstrates that our operations have not contaminated Riverdale's water supply. The unfortunate health issues experienced by some residents, while tragic, cannot be scientifically linked to our facility. Green continued for nearly 40 minutes, systematically dismantling the town's claims with technical language and references to precedents where similar cases had been dismissed. When it was Rivera's turn, he appeared nervous but determined. He began by recounting the personal stories of affected families, trying to humanize the case against the cold data presented by Northstar. Your Honor, behind every statistic in this case is a human being, a child who can no longer play outside due to respiratory issues, a father who may not live to see his daughter graduate because of a rare cancer, a community living in fear of the water coming from their own taps. Lily watched, tense, wondering if he would bring up her discovery. 10 minutes into his argument, Rivera paused, seeming to make a decision. Your Honor, I would like to present new information that has come to light regarding the methodology of Northstar's environmental testing. Green was immediately on his feet. Objection. The discovery phase of this trial is complete. The plaintiff cannot introduce new evidence at this stage. I'm not introducing new evidence, Rivera countered. I'm offering a new analysis of the evidence already submitted to the court. Judge Thompson considered this. I'll allow you to continue, Mr. Rivera, but be aware that any new factual claims not supported by the existing evidence will be stricken. Rivera nodded and proceeded to explain Lily's findings, carefully framing them as an analytical interpretation rather than new evidence. He displayed Northstar's own testing dates alongside rainfall records and the company's production schedules. When viewed together, Your Honor, these records reveal a troubling pattern. Every single water test conducted by Northstar was performed during periods of low production and following significant rainfall events. This strategic timing would naturally result in lower contaminant readings, creating a misleading impression of the facility's actual environmental impact. The courtroom stirred with murmurs. Green objected again more forcefully. Your Honor, this is speculation from counsel, not expert testimony. The plaintiff had ample opportunity to hire their own experts to review this data. Judge Thompson looked troubled. Mr. Rivera, while your analysis is interesting, Mr. Green makes a valid point. Without expert testimony to support these claims, I cannot give them significant weight in my decision. Lily felt her heart sink. It wasn't enough. They needed an expert, credentials, someone the court would respect. Rivera seemed to deflate slightly but continued his argument as best he could. As the closing arguments concluded, Judge Thompson announced she would retire to her chambers to consider her verdict. Given the complexity of this case, I will return with my decision after lunch recess. Court is adjourned until 1:30 p.m. The courtroom began to empty. Lily sat frozen in her seat, a terrible feeling of helplessness washing over her. They had come so close. It was a good try, Professor Wilson said, squeezing her shoulder. Rivera did what he could with what you gave him. Lily nodded, but her mind was racing again. There had to be something more they could do, some way to make the judge understand the significance of the pattern she had found. As people filed out for the lunch break, Lily noticed Dr. Bennett, Northstar's expert witness, gathering his materials at the defense table. He was alone for the moment, the Northstar attorneys having stepped out. Without fully forming a plan, Lily found herself walking toward him. Dr. Bennett, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. My name is Lily Zhang. He looked up, mildly surprised. Hello, can I help you with something? I was wondering if you were familiar with the work of Dr. Mei Zhang on contaminant testing methodologies, specifically her paper on temporal variables in environmental sampling. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Dr. Zhang? Yes, of course. Her work on strategic sampling practices was quite influential. Why do you ask? She was my mother, Lily said simply. And I think you know exactly what Northstar has been doing with their testing schedule. The color drained slightly from Dr. Bennett's face. Before he could respond, one of Northstar's attorneys returned, eyeing Lily suspiciously. Is everything all right, Doctor? The attorney asked. Fine, Dr. Bennett said quickly. Just a student with questions about environmental science. Lily held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. She couldn't be sure, but she thought she had seen something in his eyes. A flash of discomfort, perhaps even guilt. It wasn't much, but it was something. And with the judge's decision just hours away, something was better than nothing. The lunch break would give her time for one last attempt to make the truth heard. The courthouse cafeteria buzzed with tense conversations. Townspeople huddled around small tables, their voices low and worried. Lily sat alone, picking at a sandwich she had no appetite for, her mind racing through possibilities. The brief exchange with Dr. Bennett had stirred something inside her, a determination that was quickly hardening into resolve. Professor Wilson slid into the seat across from her, setting down a cup of coffee. You look like you're plotting something. Lily glanced up. I spoke to Dr. Bennett. The professor's eyebrows shot up. North Star's expert? What did you say to him? I mentioned my mother's work. I think he recognized her name. There was something in his reaction. She trailed off, trying to put her finger on what exactly she had seen in the expert's face. Lily, Professor Wilson's voice turned serious. You need to be very careful. These people have a lot at stake. Millions of dollars, corporate reputation, potential lawsuits beyond just this town if they're found liable. I know that, she said. But this town has even more at stake. Lives, Professor. Real people's lives. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. What are you planning to do? The judge is about to rule, and Rivera already presented your findings as best he could. Lily stared into her untouched drink. I'm not sure yet, but that wasn't entirely true. An idea had been forming in her mind since she'd walked away from Dr. Bennett. It was risky, possibly even reckless, but it might be the only chance left. I need to make a call, she said, standing up abruptly. I'll see you back in the courtroom. Finding a quiet corner near the courthouse steps, Lily pulled out her phone and dialed her mother's old colleague. Dr. Lin, he picked up on the fourth ring. Dr. Lin, it's Lily Zhang. I need your help with something urgent. She quickly explained the situation, the pattern she'd found in North Star's testing data, and her suspicion that Dr. Bennett knew exactly what was happening. That's a serious accusation, Dr. Lin said carefully. Bennett has a sterling reputation. I know, but this pattern isn't coincidence. It's too perfect. Every single test was conducted under optimal conditions for minimizing readings. You worked with my mother on sampling methodologies. You know this is exactly the kind of manipulation she warned about. There was a long pause on the line. What do you need from me? I need you to look at the data. Right now, I can email it to you. Lily, I'm in the middle of a conference in Boston. Please, she said, letting her desperation show in her voice. The judge is ruling in less than an hour. These people have been suffering for years. If North Star gets away with this, nothing will change. Another pause, longer this time. Send me what you have. I'll step out of this panel discussion and take a look. But I can't promise anything. Thank you, Lily breathed. I'm sending it now. She quickly forwarded the documents from her email along with her notes highlighting the pattern. After that, there was nothing to do but wait and hope. Returning to the courthouse, Lily found Rivera pacing in the hallway outside the courtroom. Mr. Rivera, she called, hurrying toward him. I've sent the data to Dr. Lin at Berkeley. He was my mother's research partner. He's looking at it right now. Rivera stopped pacing, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. You did what? Without consulting me? There wasn't time, Lily said. And you were in meetings with town officials during lunch. Lily, I appreciate your initiative, but this isn't how legal proceedings work. Even if Dr. Lin agrees with your analysis, we can't just spring a new expert on the court at the last minute. But if he confirms the pattern, it won't matter. Rivera cut her off, his voice gentler now. The judge won't reopen arguments. That's not how this works. Lily felt her shoulders slump. So we just give up? We let them win by manipulating the system? Rivera looked at her for a long moment. Sometimes the system doesn't work the way it should, but we have to play by its rules or we lose automatically. Before Lily could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was from Dr. Lin. With trembling fingers, she opened it. You were right, the message began. This pattern is deliberate and designed to minimize detectable contaminants. It's the textbook definition of strategic sampling bias. I've attached a quick analysis. If you need me to testify about this in future proceedings, call me. Your mother would be proud of what you've spotted here. Lily's heart raced as she showed the email to Rivera. He read it quickly, his frown deepening. This confirms what we suspected, he said, but it doesn't change our immediate situation. The judge won't consider this now. Then what was the point of any of this? Lily demanded, frustration making her voice rise. Why did we even bother fighting if the system is so rigged against us? It's not rigged, it's just structured. There are procedures, timelines, rules of evidence. Without those, the system would collapse into chaos. Maybe a little chaos is what we need when the rules protect the wrong people. Lily muttered. Rivera gave her a sharp look. Don't do anything rash, Lily. You have a promising future ahead of you. Don't jeopardize that. The warning bell rang, signaling that court would reconvene in 5 minutes. People began filing back into the courtroom, faces drawn with tension and anticipation. Lily took her seat next to Professor Wilson, her mind still churning with thoughts of what to do. Dr. Lynn's confirmation had only strengthened her conviction that North Star was deliberately deceiving the court and the town. "You look like you're about to jump out of your skin," Professor Wilson whispered. "Did something happen during the break?" "Dr. Lynn confirmed my analysis," she whispered back. "The sampling pattern was deliberate. It's textbook manipulation." The professor nodded slowly. "I'm not surprised. But what can we do about it now?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Judge Thompson entered and everyone rose. As they sat back down, Lily noticed Dr. Bennett taking a seat in the gallery rather than at the defense table. His job as expert witness was done. Now he was just another spectator waiting for the verdict. He looked uncomfortable, repeatedly checking his watch and shifting in his seat. "Having considered the arguments and evidence presented in this case," Judge Thompson began, "I am prepared to render my decision." Lily felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. This was it. After all their work, after discovering the truth about North Star's deception, they were about to lose because of procedural rules and timing. "Before I do so," the judge continued, "I want to address Mr. Rivera's closing argument regarding the timing of North Star's environmental testing. While I found the analysis interesting, without expert testimony to validate these concerns, I cannot give them significant weight in my decision." Rivera nodded grimly. He had expected this. "The burden of proof in this case rests with the plaintiff," Judge Thompson went on. "Riverdale must demonstrate by a preponderance of evidence that North Star Chemicals operations directly caused the health issues experienced by residents. Based on the expert testimony and data presented," as the judge continued, Lily felt something breaking inside her. Years of her mother's teachings about standing up for truth, about the importance of scientific integrity, about using knowledge to help people. All of it seemed to be crumbling in the face of this procedural defeat. Without fully realizing what she was doing, Lily found herself on her feet. "Your Honor," she heard herself say, her voice ringing out clearly in the suddenly silent courtroom. Every head turned toward her. Rivera looked horrified. Professor Wilson reached for her arm, but she was already stepping into the aisle. "Young lady," Judge Thompson said sternly, "you are not a party to this case nor an officer of the court. Please take your seat immediately." "Your Honor, my name is Lily Zhang. I'm the intern who discovered the pattern in North Star's testing data that Mr. Rivera mentioned." "Ms. Zhang, this is highly irregular and inappropriate. Sit down now or I will have you removed from my courtroom." Lily felt a tremor run through her body, but she stood her ground. "Your Honor, I have confirmation from Dr. Albert Lin of Berkeley University that the pattern is real and deliberate. He was my mother's research partner at the Environmental Protection Institute." The judge's face darkened. "Bailiff, please escort Ms. Zhang out of the courtroom." A court officer began moving toward Lily. In the gallery, people were murmuring and reporters were scribbling furiously in their notebooks. "Your Honor, please," Lily said, her voice rising with urgency as the bailiff approached. "Dr. Bennett knows the truth. The sampling dates were deliberately chosen to coincide with rainfall and maintenance periods. It's scientific fraud." The bailiff took her arm, but before he could lead her away, something unexpected happened. "Wait," Dr. Bennett's voice rang out. He stood up from his seat in the gallery, his face pale but determined. "I would like to address the court." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Thompson banged her gavel. "Order!" "Dr. Bennett, you have already completed your testimony. This is highly irregular. I understand, Your Honor," he said, "but I need to clarify something about my previous testimony." Judge Thompson studied him for a long moment, then nodded to the bailiff. "Release Ms. Zhang, but she is to return to her seat immediately." To Dr. Bennett, she said, "Approach the bench, doctor." As Lily returned to her seat, her legs feeling like rubber, Dr. Bennett walked to the front of the courtroom. Rivera and Green, North Star's attorney, joined him before the judge. Their conversation was hushed, but the tension in their postures was visible to everyone. After several minutes, Judge Thompson addressed the court. "In light of new information, I am temporarily suspending my ruling in this case. We will take a 30-minute recess, after which Dr. Bennett has requested to provide additional testimony. Court is adjourned until 2:15 p.m. As the judge left the bench, the courtroom burst into conversation. Rivera hurried over to where Lily sat, his expression unreadable. "What did you say to Bennett during the lunch break?" he demanded in a low voice. "I just mentioned my mother's work," Lily said, still shocked by what had happened. "I didn't threaten him or anything like that." Rivera ran a hand through his hair. "Well, whatever you did, it worked. He's asked to revise his testimony. Says he wants to clarify certain methodological aspects of the testing procedures." Professor Wilson let out a low whistle. "That could change everything. Or it could be nothing," Rivera cautioned. "Don't get your hopes up yet." But there was a new energy in his movements, a spark of possibility that hadn't been there before. Lily sat back in her seat, her heart still racing. She had taken an enormous risk, one that could have resulted in her being held in contempt of court or worse. But something had gotten through to Dr. Bennett. Perhaps a reminder of scientific integrity. Perhaps just the weight of his own conscience. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally fighting its way to the surface. And sometimes, Lily thought, remembering her mother's words, that's all it takes, one voice speaking the truth, even when no one wants to hear it. The 30-minute recess stretched into an hour as attorneys for both sides huddled in separate corners of the courthouse hallway, their hushed voices occasionally rising with tension. Lily sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, her stomach in knots, watching the clock on the wall tick by with excruciating slowness. "You took a huge risk in there," Professor Wilson said, sitting down beside her. "I don't know whether to scold you or congratulate you." Lily gave a weak smile. "I'm not sure either. Whatever happens next, you showed real courage. Not many students would have done what you did." "Or real foolishness," she replied. "I could have been held in contempt of court." "I still might be." The professor shook his head. "I don't think so. Not now that Bennett has asked to revise his testimony. Something you said got to him." Lily thought back to their brief exchange. "I just mentioned my mother's work. I think he respected her. Maybe he couldn't face the idea of going against everything she stood for with scientific integrity." Before Professor Wilson could respond, Rivera emerged from a side room, his face flushed with either anger or excitement. Lily couldn't tell which. "They're trying to strike a deal," he announced, keeping his voice low despite his obvious agitation. "North Star's lawyers are offering a settlement." "A settlement?" Lily repeated, surprised. "That's good, right? It means they're worried about what Bennett might say." Rivera ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "It's not that simple. They're offering to establish a health monitoring fund and install additional filtration systems in the town water supply, but they're refusing to admit any wrongdoing and they want all the court records sealed." "Sealed?" Professor Wilson frowned. "That would prevent any of this from becoming public or being used in other cases against them." "Exactly," Rivera agreed. "And they want a non-disclosure agreement from everyone involved in the case, including you, Lily." The implication was clear. They wanted to silence her, to bury her discovery about their testing methods so it couldn't be used against them elsewhere. "What do the town officials say?" Lily asked. "They're considering it. The health fund would help people who are already sick, and the filtration system would prevent more contamination. It's more than we were likely to get before Bennett asked to revise his testimony. But it lets North Star off the hook," Lily said, anger rising in her voice. "They keep poisoning other communities and no one ever knows what they did here." Rivera sighed. "Welcome to the real world of environmental litigation. Sometimes a partial victory is the best you can hope for." A court officer appeared at the courtroom door. "Judge Thompson is ready to resume proceedings." Inside, the courtroom was even more packed than before. Word had spread about the dramatic interruption and every seat was filled. Reporters lined the back wall, notebooks and recorders at the ready. Lily slipped into her seat just as Judge Thompson took the bench. The judge's expression was stern as she surveyed the courtroom. "Before we proceed, I want to make it clear that what happened earlier will not be tolerated again. This court operates according to established procedures, and those procedures will be respected." Her gaze lingered briefly on Lily before moving on. "Now, I understand that Dr. Bennett has requested to provide additional testimony. Before we hear from him, are there any matters counsel would like to address?" Richard Green, North Star's lead attorney, stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We would like to inform the court that settlement discussions are underway between North Star Chemical and the town of Riverdale. We request a 24-hour continuance to finalize these discussions." Judge Thompson turned to Rivera. Mr. Rivera, does the plaintiff join in this request? Rivera stood slowly. The town is considering North Star's offer, Your Honor. However, he paused, seeming to wrestle with himself. However, before the court grants a continuance, I believe it would be in the interest of justice to hear Dr. Bennett's revised testimony. Green was immediately on his feet again. Objection, Your Honor. If settlement discussions are in progress, there's no need to prolong these proceedings. The judge considered this for a moment. Mr. Rivera, is there a particular reason you want Dr. Bennett's testimony on record before settlement discussions continue? Yes, Your Honor, Rivera said firmly. The nature of his revised testimony may significantly impact the terms the town is willing to accept. Judge Thompson nodded. I'm going to allow Dr. Bennett to testify. Settlement discussions can continue afterward if both parties still wish to pursue that route. Green's face reddened, but he sat down without further argument. Dr. Bennett, please come forward, the judge directed. The expert witness approached the stand, looking considerably less confident than he had during his previous testimony. After being sworn in again, he sat down, his posture stiff and uncomfortable. Dr. Bennett, Judge Thompson began, you've asked to revise or clarify aspects of your previous testimony. Please proceed, Bennett cleared his throat. Yes, Your Honor. After reflection, I believe I need to provide additional context regarding the water testing methodologies employed in this case. The courtroom fell completely silent. Even the usual shuffling and whispers ceased as everyone strained to hear his words. In my previous testimony, I stated that all water samples taken from the river downstream from North Star's facility showed contaminant levels below EPA thresholds. This statement was factually accurate based on the samples provided to me for analysis. He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. However, I failed to adequately address the timing of those samples. Upon further consideration of the data, I must acknowledge that the testing schedule employed by North Star Chemical shows a consistent pattern that could be interpreted as strategic sampling. Green half rose from his seat, but a sharp look from Judge Thompson made him sit back down. Could you explain what you mean by strategic sampling, Dr. Bennett? The judge asked. Strategic sampling refers to the practice of selectively choosing when and where to collect environmental samples to influence the results. In this case, all water samples were collected during periods of low production at the facility and following significant rainfall events. Both factors would tend to reduce the concentration of potential contaminants in the water. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Thompson banged her gavel once for silence. And in your expert opinion, Dr. Bennett, was this pattern coincidental or deliberate? Bennett hesitated, his eyes briefly meeting Lily's across the courtroom. In my professional judgment, the consistency of the pattern strongly suggests a deliberate testing strategy designed to minimize the detection of contaminants. The courtroom erupted. Townspeople gasped and turned to each other in shock. Reporters scribbled furiously. Green was on his feet, shouting objections that couldn't be heard over the commotion. Judge Thompson banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! I will have order in this court. Gradually the noise subsided, though the atmosphere remained charged with tension. Dr. Bennett, the judge continued when quiet had been restored, why did you not mention this concern during your original testimony? Bennett looked down at his hands. I focused narrowly on the technical analysis of the samples themselves rather than the broader context of how they were collected. That was an oversight on my part. It was a diplomatic answer, avoiding direct admission that he had deliberately overlooked the pattern. But everyone in the courtroom understood what had happened. Your Honor, Green interjected, his voice tight with controlled fury. North Star Chemical strongly disputes Dr. Bennett's new characterization of our testing procedures. We would like the opportunity to cross-examine the witness. Proceed, Mr. Green, the judge said. What followed was a brutal cross-examination as Green tried to force Bennett to recant or at least soften his revised testimony. But the expert held firm, answering each question with increasingly confident precision. Dr. Bennett, are you suggesting that North Star Chemical deliberately falsified environmental data? Green demanded. No, Bennett replied. I'm stating that the company appears to have deliberately selected testing times that would produce favorable results. The data itself is accurate for those specific conditions, but it fails to represent typical operating conditions at the facility. And you're making this claim based on a pattern noticed by an undergraduate intern with no formal training in environmental science? Green's voice dripped with condescension. Bennett straightened in his chair. I'm making this claim based on my own analysis of the data, which confirms the pattern initially identified by Ms. Zhang. And for the record, the methodology used to identify this pattern is consistent with the work of Dr. Mei Zhang, a respected authority in the field of environmental testing procedures and, as I recently learned, Ms. Zhang's mother. At the mention of her mother, Lily felt tears spring to her eyes. She blinked them back, unwilling to show emotion in this crucial moment. Green's cross-examination continued for nearly an hour, but he couldn't shake Bennett's testimony. When he finally sat down, his face was flushed with frustration. Rivera's redirect examination was brief and focused. Dr. Bennett, in your expert opinion, if water samples had been taken during normal production periods and in the absence of recent rainfall, would the contaminant levels likely have exceeded EPA thresholds? Based on the pattern observed and my knowledge of similar industrial processes, yes, I believe they would have, Bennett answered firmly. And could exposure to those higher contaminant levels explain the health issues experienced by Riverdale residents? Yes. The types of contaminants involved are consistent with the health problems reported in the community. When Bennett was finally excused from the stand, Judge Thompson called both attorneys to the bench for a lengthy sidebar conversation. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as everyone tried to guess what would happen next. Finally, the judge addressed the court. In light of Dr. Bennett's revised testimony, I am ordering an immediate independent environmental assessment of the North Star chemical facility and the surrounding watershed. This assessment will include water sampling during normal production periods. Green began to object, but the judge cut him off. Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary injunction requiring North Star to reduce production to 50% of normal capacity until this assessment is complete. Court is adjourned until the results of the independent assessment are available, at which time I will consider whether to make the injunction permanent and what additional remedies may be appropriate. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted again, this time in celebration from the townspeople. Rivera was immediately surrounded by town officials and residents, all talking excitedly. Reporters rushed from the room to file their stories. Lily sat stunned, barely able to process what had just happened. They had won, not a final victory yet, but a crucial turning point that would likely lead to one. You did it, Professor Wilson said, squeezing her shoulder. Your mother would be incredibly proud. I can't believe it actually worked, Lily whispered. Truth has a power all its own, he replied. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to speak it. As the initial excitement began to die down, Rivera made his way over to where Lily sat. That was either the bravest or the most reckless thing I've ever seen a law student do, he said, his expression a mix of admiration and residual concern. You could have been held in contempt, barred from ever practicing law. I know, Lily admitted, but I couldn't just sit there and watch them get away with it. Rivera shook his head, but he was smiling now. Well, it paid off this time. The settlement offer is off the table. The town is going to see this through to the end now. And based on Bennett's testimony and whatever the independent assessment finds, we're in a much stronger position. What made Bennett change his testimony? Professor Wilson asked. Was it really just Lily mentioning her mother's work? I think it was more than that, Rivera said. After court, he told me he'd been uncomfortable with North Star's testing practices for a while, but he'd convinced himself it wasn't his place to question their methods. When Lily confronted him, and especially when she mentioned Dr. Mei Zhang, it forced him to face what he was really doing by defending their practices. Lily thought about this. One person speaking up had given another the courage to do the same. Maybe that's how change really happened. Not in grand gestures, but in moments of individual courage that inspired others. As they left the courthouse, they found a crowd gathered on the steps. When people spotted Lily, they began to applaud. Someone shouted, "Thank you for fighting for us." Others joined in, the applause growing louder. Overwhelmed, Lily stopped on the steps, the afternoon sun warm on her face. For the first time since the trial began, she felt her mother's presence strongly, as if she were standing right beside her. You always taught me to speak the truth, Lily whispered, too quietly for anyone else to hear. Even when it's not convenient. Even when no one wants to listen. The truth had been spoken in that courtroom today, not just by her but by Dr. Bennett too, and for once everyone had listened. The silence that had followed, that moment when everyone in the room had realized what was happening, had been more powerful than any applause. It was just the beginning of a longer fight, Lily knew. North Star Chemical wouldn't give up easily, and other companies like them continued to pollute communities across the country. But today had shown her the power of one voice speaking the truth. Today had changed everything. 6 months passed before Judge Thompson reconvened the court to hear the results of the independent environmental assessment. During that time, life in Riverdale had begun to change. With North Star's operations reduced to half capacity, residents reported noticing subtle differences. The metallic taste in the water was less pronounced, and children with respiratory issues were having fewer attacks. The morning of the final hearing dawned bright and clear. Lily arrived at the courthouse early, having barely slept the night before. The last 6 months had transformed her in ways she hadn't expected. After her dramatic stand in the courtroom, she had been approached by several environmental law firms offering her internships when she graduated. Local news outlets had interviewed her, and a national environmental magazine had even featured her in an article about young activists making a difference. But none of that was why she was here today. She was here to see justice done for the people of Riverdale. The courtroom filled quickly. Many familiar faces from the town nodded to her as they entered. They no longer looked at her with curiosity or surprise. Now there was respect and even affection in their greetings. She had become part of their community in a way she never expected. Professor Wilson arrived and took the seat next to her. "Big day," he said simply. Lily nodded, too nervous for words. Rivera joined them briefly before court was called to session. "The assessment team is here," he told them in a low voice. "I haven't seen the final report yet, but their preliminary findings were strong. Very strong." Before Lily could ask for details, the bailiff called for everyone to rise as Judge Thompson entered the courtroom. "Be seated," the judge said. She looked over the crowded room, her expression giving nothing away. 6 months ago, this court ordered an independent environmental assessment of North Star Chemical's operations and its impact on Riverdale's water supply. Today we will hear the results of that assessment. I remind everyone that the same rules of decorum apply. There will be no outbursts or interruptions. Her gaze lingered briefly on Lily, who felt her cheeks warm. The court calls Dr. Victoria Henderson, lead scientist of the independent assessment team. A woman in her 50s approached the witness stand. She had silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and wore a simple navy suit. After being sworn in, she sat down with calm confidence. "Dr. Henderson," Judge Thompson began, "please state your credentials for the court." "I hold a PhD in environmental toxicology from Stanford University. I've spent 25 years studying industrial contaminants and their impact on ecosystems and human health. I currently direct the Environmental Assessment Division at the National Institute of Ecological Health. Our team for this assessment included specialists in hydrology, soil science, epidemiology, and industrial chemistry. Thank you. Please describe the methodology used in your assessment." Dr. Henderson explained how her team had conducted water and soil sampling at multiple points around the North Star facility and throughout Riverdale over a 4-month period. They had specifically designed their testing schedule to capture data during different production cycles at the plant and under varying weather conditions.